I thought Caitlin's playmaking ability, really kind of got us going. We got into a nice rhythm in that second quarter and scored a lot of points. So
in professional sports, the business side often becomes a ruthless battle between the established legacy system and the disruptive forces of the future. When a powerful organization, whether a Fortune 500 tech company or a deeply rooted institution like USA Basketball, is confronted with a reality that challenges its long-standing structure, its first reaction is usually denial. The leadership tries to suppress the disruption, placing the new and highly efficient talent behind established veterans in the name of seniority, tradition, and paying dues. The goal is to prove that the old system still works and that the people in charge still control the direction of the game. However, the free market of performance rarely allows that narrative to survive for long. When the numbers, results, and impact become overwhelmingly clear, the gap between the old model and the new star becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually, the establishment is forced to acknowledge, often publicly, that its initial strategy failed. This dynamic is playing out in real time with the USA Basketball women's national team. Head coach Kara Lawson made a controversial and highly scrutinized decision to bench Caitlin Clark in her senior international debut, choosing instead to start the veteran core to reinforce the existing hierarchy of women's basketball. But once the game began, the contrast became undeniable. The starting lineup struggled to generate rhythm, and the offense appeared stagnant. The moment Clark stepped onto the floor, the entire geometry of the game changed. Spacing improved, tempo increased, and the offense suddenly came alive. By the time Lawson faced the media after the game, the pressure was obvious. The global sports audience wanted to know why the most explosive offensive engine in the sport had been left on the bench. In a rare moment of blunt transparency, Lawson acknowledged that the team simply did not operate at an elite level until the 24-year-old point guard took control of the game.
I thought Caitlin's playmaking ability, really kind of got us going. We got into a nice rhythm in that second quarter and scored a lot of points. So
listen carefully to the exact phrasing used by Team USA's head coach. Kara Lawson did not simply say that Caitlin Clark played well. Instead, she admitted that Clark's playmaking was what truly sparked the team's momentum. Lawson acknowledged that Team USA struggled to find rhythm, establish offensive flow, or take control of the game until the second quarter. And during that stretch, it was not the veteran starting lineup running the offense. It was Clark commanding the floor as a primary playmaker and floor general. Her presence shifted the pace, organization, and overall effectiveness of the offense. This admission carries significant weight in the broader debate surrounding Clark's impact. For the past 2 years, many critics within the veteran establishment have pushed the narrative that Clark is simply a high-volume scorer who shoots too much and disrupts team chemistry. The argument was that her style would not translate well to a roster filled with elite stars. Yet Lawson's comments on international television effectively dismantled that narrative. She confirmed that Clark's passing, court vision, and ability to read defensive rotations at an elite processing speed were precisely what unlocked the entire USA basketball offense. At the same time, Lawson appeared careful in how she framed the situation. As a coach responsible for the original lineup decision, she avoided directly calling the earlier strategy a mistake. Instead, when reporters pressed her about the substitution patterns and the choice to keep Clark on the bench initially, she leaned on the type of cautious language often heard in corporate management, carefully phrased explanations designed to acknowledge the outcome without openly admitting the original decision had been wrong.
Don't read a lot into, we've talked about this with our players, like the starting lineup's going to change, the rotations are going to change. As a coach, I'm still in fact-finding mode, not in terms of who they are. I know who they are as players, but trying to find some chemistry and see what combinations fit best together.
The phrase, "I'm still in fact-finding mode," sounded less like uncertainty and more like the language of a corporate manager realizing they may have misjudged their most valuable asset. In business, when a CEO launches a product that fails to connect with consumers while a backup product suddenly breaks sales records, the leader rarely admits a mistake. Instead, they say they were gathering data or testing the market. That comparison mirrors the situation surrounding Caitlin Clark. The reality is that the basketball world already knows exactly who Clark is. She became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history and quickly established herself as one of the most influential young stars in the sport. When Kara Lawson stood before the media suggesting she was still evaluating Clark's role, Many observers viewed it as a difficult claim to accept. Clark had just delivered a dominant performance, recording a massive double-double and an impressive plus 35 rating in only 12 minutes on the floor. For fans and analysts, presenting that situation as fact-finding seemed less like uncertainty and more like an attempt to manage a narrative. Yet Lawson's statement also contained a major concession. She admitted that the starting lineup would likely change. That single line signaled that the original plan, prioritizing the veteran hierarchy, had not produced the expected result for USA basketball. The implication was clear. The experiment of limiting Clark's role had not worked, and the coaching staff now needed to restructure the rotations. In competitive sports, just as in business, when a clearly superior asset proves its value, the system eventually has to adapt. Clark is not simply a complementary player who enters a game when others need rest. Her skill set as a playmaker and offensive catalyst changes the entire dynamic of a team. When a player with that level of vision, scoring ability, and pace control is surrounded by elite athletes, the result can dramatically elevate the performance of the entire lineup. Lawson, recognizing that her earlier explanation sounded weak, was ultimately forced to expand on why Clark's presence on the court so dramatically transformed the Team USA offense.
And as much as she is dynamic as a scorer, she's one of the most dynamic playmakers in the world as well. And so we just talked about her utilizing all the talent. It's the most talented team she's played on. So imagine being a dynamic playmaker, and then all of a sudden you're playing alongside all these other dynamic playmakers and finishers. And so I thought she toggled between, the playmaking and the scoring really well tonight, and looked pretty comfortable out there. So I was proud.
According to Kara Lawson, Caitlin Clark is one of the most dynamic playmakers in the world. The real impact of that statement becomes clear when a player with Clark's vision and creativity is surrounded by other elite playmakers and finishers. Instead of carrying the entire offensive burden alone, she can distribute the ball to teammates capable of running the floor, catching long transition passes, and finishing aggressively at the rim. This scenario is exactly what many observers believe could unlock Clark's full potential on the international stage. In games like the recent matchup against Senegal women's national basketball team, Clark did far more than simply score. She orchestrated the offense like a conductor, manipulating defenses with her vision and passing ability. Her wraparound passes and perfectly timed assists created easy scoring opportunities for teammates such as Monique Billings and Kiki Ariafin, turning routine possessions into high-efficiency plays. Her presence elevated the entire lineup, making players around her more effective simply through the pace, spacing, and creativity she brought to the floor. Lawson's remark about playing alongside dynamic finishers also highlighted an underlying debate about lineup decisions. Some analysts questioned why a player with Clark's playmaking profile was not paired from the start with teammates who could best capitalize on her passing and tempo. For many in the media room, this created a noticeable contradiction. The coach was praising the effectiveness of the bench unit while trying to avoid directly criticizing the veteran starting group that included Chelsea Gray. Recognizing that tension, one reporter asked a direct and specific question: which player combinations actually worked best during the game? At that moment, Lawson faced a difficult position. She could not simply deflect the question or rely on vague explanations. She had to acknowledge which lineup truly shifted the momentum and helped stabilize the game for USA basketball.
For combinations that fit well, which combinations did you like today?
Well, I kind of already mentioned that group in the second quarter. I thought got into a good rhythm offensively. I think it was Caitlin, KP, Ryan, Monique, and Kiki. I thought we got into a
Caitlin
good
should
flow.
have started. You messed
And when
up.
I say combinations that
cool.
play,
During the post-game discussion, Kara Lawson finally identified the lineup that truly shifted the momentum of the game. She pointed back to the second quarter and named the group directly: Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Plum, Ryan Howard, Monique Billings, and Kiki Ariafin. According to Lawson, this was the combination that created offensive rhythm, generated high-quality scoring opportunities, and improved the team's defensive rotations. With Clark orchestrating the offense, the unit brought energy, pace, and fluid ball movement that immediately changed the dynamic on the court. This lineup emphasized speed, spacing, perimeter shooting, and athleticism, a style that contrasted sharply with the slower, more methodical approach often associated with traditional lineups. Once that group stepped onto the floor together, the team's performance noticeably improved, reinforcing the idea that their chemistry and tempo were particularly effective in that moment of the game. By acknowledging that specific combination as the most successful unit, Lawson essentially highlighted which players had driven the turnaround and helped stabilize the team's performance. For many observers and fans following USA basketball, that moment served as a clear signal about where the team's most effective on-court synergy appeared to lie. Regardless of how the situation might be framed publicly, with references to experimentation, lineup evaluation, or chemistry building, the audience watching the game could see which lineup produced results. In the end, the reaction from the broader basketball community reflected a growing belief that when elite playmaking, shooting, and athletic finishing come together in the right combination, the impact on the game can be immediate and unmistakable.
Bruh, at the end of the day, she made a big mistake by not starting Caitlin Clark, and now she's looking like a deer in her headlights. Well, I think, Caitlin Clark and Ryan Howard are just a better look. We just got to wait and see, and I talked to I don't hear that! I'm finna be live in a hot second. We finna talk about this. Caitlin Clark should have been a starter.
Many critics believe the pressure on Kara Lawson became obvious during the press conference because the decision not to start Caitlin Clark had immediately become one of the most discussed storylines of the game. From that perspective, the situation placed Lawson in a difficult position. If she continued to rely on the veteran starting lineup, she risked further criticism if the offense struggled again. But as she elevated Clark into a permanent starting role, it would signal a clear shift in the team's hierarchy and direction. For observers, it highlighted the delicate balance coaches must manage between experience, locker room dynamics, and on-court performance when building a national team lineup. At the same time, the broader conversation around USA basketball reflects how quickly momentum can shift in professional sports. Clark's impact, particularly her playmaking, pace control, and ability to elevate teammates, has intensified debates about the future direction of women's basketball and the evolving roles of established veterans versus emerging stars. Her strong performance, including an efficient double-double in limited minutes, fueled arguments from fans and analysts that the team's offense functions at a higher level when she is orchestrating it. This debate is unfolding while the wider women's basketball landscape, including the Women's National Basketball Association, faces its own challenges and negotiations. As a result, every major performance or coaching decision becomes part of a much larger discussion about influence, star power, and the future of the sport. Ultimately, the situation has sparked intense reactions among fans worldwide, many of whom are closely watching to see whether Team USA will build its future strategy more heavily around Clark's playmaking leadership or continue balancing roles among its experienced veterans and rising stars.